Related to some of the your discussion around the Overton window, there's also been a big shift of just the number and type of people who are now starting to accumulate Bitcoin, if even in small size. I feel like at River, you guys have a really you kind of have a front row seat to that, because one of the things Alex will tweet out sometimes, which I think is quite interesting, especially at times of market turmoil, is what the buy-sell ratio is from River customers. And it's always interesting to see, for example, an event like October 2022, when the world's falling apart and FTX is going down, you were still seeing majority buy volume from River customers, which is sort of nice to see, and I think a testament to your customer base. But how are you seeing really the customers that you're serving change over time? Because I feel like it's probably a good proxy for how Bitcoin is changing in terms of the demographics.
It's a good question. I think the biggest growth we've seen in the last 6 to 8 months has been in businesses buying Bitcoin. We still have strong growth amongst individual investors, but I would say that the last 6 months in the rally and all the price action, it just does not feel like it's been retail driven. Like we see a steady baseline of business there, but the mania just isn't what it was in previous bubbles. And so I think what we're seeing is more mature money coming to the table. Alongside, I do think there's probably like OGs doing some selling as well, which has maybe contributed to some of why we're not higher than we are. But the biggest uptick has been businesses buying Bitcoin, small, medium-sized businesses, and kind of people completing the trajectory of their Bitcoin journey. So, typically we serve, individual investors, typically what we call mass affluent and up, anyone with a good job and up, and we serve small, medium-sized businesses. And so often what you see is somebody buys Bitcoin, they're an entrepreneur, and there's a ton of entrepreneurs in the United States. There's tons of small, medium-sized businesses, and they buy Bitcoin for themselves, they get orange pilled, and then all of a sudden, maybe see Michael Saylor talking, or they're like, well, if I'm buying it for myself, why am I paying myself for my business to buy Bitcoin? Why don't I just buy it in my company? And so then they go, so then they onboard their business. And so kind of we've seen a huge growth in the number of businesses onboarded with us, the full spectrum, right? The smallest ones being something like a hot dog stand, all the way up to public companies, regional large businesses doing everything from auto parts manufacturing to cleaning services to doctor's offices, dentists, any business you can imagine. So that's been really cool to see.
And I think that it kind of draws a natural juxtaposition to something we were talking about earlier on Twitter Spaces, which is now obviously we're hearing a lot about businesses buying Bitcoin, but more so of the public variety. Obviously, it started with Michael Saylor in 2020 using $400 million of cash that he had on balance sheet to buy Bitcoin. That then is sort of cascaded into them owning 500,000 Bitcoin now, constantly issuing securities to buy Bitcoin. New copycats have spun up in wake of this too, whether it be Semler Scientific last year in the US or Metaplanet in Japan. And I think Metaplanet last year is the best performing equity in the world. Which for those of you who aren't familiar, Metaplanet was basically a hotel business in Japan that was defunct during COVID. And the CEO, a gentleman named Simon Garovich, he was a former Goldman Sachs derivatives trader. And now they basically have kind of replicated that Michael Saylor playbook. And then, of course, even this year, I think we've seen a handful of new entrants as well, whether it be Nakamoto with David Bailey, 21 with Jack Mallers. I think GameStop's buying Bitcoin. One of the Trump companies issued some equity to buy Bitcoin as well. I know we just sort of talked about this at length upstairs for like 30 minutes, but would love to kind of hear your thoughts again now on just this whole phenomenon, whether you think it will last and what you think will really distinguish between the folks who maybe succeed with this or don't.
So my take is, I think Saylor's clearly got a genius to him, right? The way he's able to sell Bitcoin and explain it to people, and also financially engineer MicroStrategy into this sort of type of business that no one's ever seen before. Pretty amazing, pretty genius. And I think it's been overall very good for Bitcoin. I also think that, everyone, it makes sense. A lot of people are trying to run his playbook with different flavors, right? Doing it in Japan, doing it in Brazil, etc. So I think a lot of these things make sense. Someone's going to do it. Really at the end of the day, like I said upstairs, is if you're doing this, right, your product becomes your stock. Your core competency needs to be financial engineering if you're running this business. And so, like for example, a Meta Planet. Well, probably, I doubt they ever build another hotel, right? Building a hotel is a lot of work. Why would you do that? If you're going to allocate work and resources, why would you build a hotel instead of doing another sort of financial engineering thing to boost the stock 10%, right? So I think there's gonna be stuff like this. I'm skeptical that there can be too much of it. I'm skeptical that we're gonna see thousands of these proliferate successfully. So my take is it's cool, it's interesting, it's driving demand for Bitcoin, it's bringing a new flavor and attention to the space. I could see it ending poorly for a number of these companies, and it's not something I would want to run myself. I like running an operating business and building products, but hey, I like a good new drama.
No, and there's certainly no shortage of that. Yes.
That's okay. What do you think could go wrong? I mean, we're like riding a wave that really has a lot of momentum behind it, and technically that's not really a good thing when the momentum's that fast. So what do you feel is the possibility?
And again, just to repeat, basically the question is, what could go wrong? Like, how could this go wrong?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges with things like this, these sort of speculative, you could call it a mania, right? Is, as they go on, more and more people know something isn't quite right, but it's hard for anyone to exactly articulate the exact failure mode. And so the answer is, I don't know exactly what the failure mode is, or if there will be some blow up. Theoretically, what we could see is if the NAV, the value of the company right now, for those of you who don't know the lingo, right now, if a company has 1,000 Bitcoin, but the value of the company might be 2 or 3 times that, right? Because people are expecting them to be able to do more financial engineering, to buy more Bitcoin, and they're valuing like the future ability to sort of run this play. So the premium, right, that these companies have over the Bitcoin they hold, if that collapses to 0 or negative, and they need to start buying back shares and selling their Bitcoin, like Grayscale. But with Grayscale, what the difference there was that there were a lot of people running fractional reserve Bitcoin products, like BlockFi and Celsius, that were promising interest to depositors. If you deposit Bitcoin, we'll give you interest, and we'll do this trade with the Grayscale premium and give you back returns. That's not happening now, right? That's not what's happening. Nobody is, retail consumers aren't giving people Bitcoin to try and play a game like that. So I think it would be different than last blow up. I think we would just see maybe a price crash, and it would even out at some point after, the cards fall.
After sufficient blood in the streets.
We got a question back here.
Of course, the main source of paper Bitcoin could be potentially Coinbase, but we're going to assume that they're not re-hypothecating.